Hello and welcome to today's discussion entitled What's Happening with XML PM in 2023. My name is Darren Lewis and I'm your host for today's intro. And once again, our ever knowledgeable colleague, Amanpreet Kant, will be giving today's presentation. In this session, we'll provide a recap on the current state of XML PM and the latest news from Health Canada, and also review the areas to think about in preparing for mandatory XML PM submissions. Some of today's presentation topics were also discussed at last month's CAPRA event that the i4I team attended. On a side note, it was a great event, and I know Aman and our team enjoyed meeting many colleagues from the industry. It was a good chance to shake hands again. That hasn't happened in the past couple of years. I would encourage those members who did not attend to review any of the XML PM presentations, as they're quite insightful. And there's a good selection of materials presented there. Before we jump in, we're just going to go through a usual bit of WebEx instructions. I know some of you are returning guests today, but we also have many new registered attendees set to receive the recording as well. During the webinar, all microphones should be muted except for the presenters. If you experience an echo, check that your mic has remained muted in the WebEx window. The microphone icon should have a red cross through it. If the echo persists and you're using your phone for your audio, please mute all audio devices on your computer. And as per usual, at the end of the presentation, we'll have a short Q&A to answer any of your questions. If you have a question at any point during the webinar, please type a question into the Q&A panel. To send a message in the Q&A, click the Q&A button at the bottom right. Make sure that you select All Co-Hosts option from the Ask dropdown. Enter your question in the text area, and then you can press Enter. If you don't see these buttons, click the View menu and select Show Meeting Controls option, and it should display for you there. If we cannot answer the question during the Q&A, we'll contact you directly with a follow-up afterwards. And that's it for me for now. And I'll pass things over to our presenter, Aman.
Thank you, Darren, and hello, everyone. So in today's presentation, we are going to discuss the latest updates to XML PMs, as well as the mandatory transition to the XML PM format, XML PM's review, validation, and authorization, things to consider when transitioning from the product monograph to XML PM, and finally, we'll discuss possibilities for the future of XML PM. First and foremost, I'd like to begin by providing you with an update on the latest information we know about XML PM from Health Canada. So we've been anxiously awaiting the latest XML PM guidance document along with the updated master template. The updated guidance will inform everyone of any new or updated validation rules, as well as any new or updated business rules. So it's crucial, and the wait is almost over. The updated French and English guidance documents will be available on Health Canada's website sometime this month. So keep an eye out for it, and we are expecting it any day now. We are also expecting updated sample files, which will be based on the updated guidance. The sample files will be in two formats. There will obviously be the XML samples of the XML product monograph, again in both French and English. There will also be the HTML renderings of these files so that they can easily be viewed in a browser. The images referenced by the files will also be included. So having sample XML PM files is useful for examples on how things should be coded, and the HTML renderings show how things will be displayed in the style sheet. Once the XML guidance and samples are made available online, Health Canada will be seeking comments and feedback. And because these are going to be released in midsummer, they will be giving industry a 90-day comment period. And this is to ensure that industry has ample time to review and comment without conflicting with vacations and summer downtime. Another document Health Canada will be releasing is the XML PM certification form. This form is already complete and it's undergoing internal review before being released publicly. We are still eagerly awaiting Health Canada's timeline for availability, but as soon as these documents are released, we'll be analyzing them to determine what changes have been made and updating our customers and software following our quality procedures. At some point after the 90-day comment period, Health Canada will be transitioning to making XML PM the required submission format for product monographs. Throughout the history of XML PM, Health Canada has leaned towards a phased-in approach in order to give industry, software vendors, and Health Canada time to transition. This trend will continue with making XML PMs mandatory. That being said, we don't know at this time how long the transition period is or what it will entail. So even though the XML PM submissions are currently voluntary, we highly recommend that everyone start submitting XML PMs now, or at the very least, move your product monographs to the 2020 format if you haven't done so already. Why do we suggest you transition now? Because there are a number of benefits to proactively transitioning rather than when it is mandatory. For one, the current volume of XML PM submissions is low. Therefore, Health Canada is able to offer more time and attention to those submitting now. They help with the validation, hold one-on-one meetings if necessary, and even help you find control vocabulary values or add new ones for you if necessary. Since there's no free automated online validation tool available, this opportunity is definitely worth taking advantage of. In fact, we have seen a significant uptake recently. A lot more companies have started to process their product monographs to XML PM already. Another consideration to start early is because we've seen this process unfold with the FDA's SPL pilot in the US. So those who started the transition early had a longer runway for gathering all the required metadata and fine-tuning their processes without a looming deadline to contend with. You really won't get this time back, so consider the advantage of early access to all the validation help available from Health Canada. This is a time to determine how your company will move forward with the XML PM. Will you be doing them in-house or outsourcing them? Which teams will be involved? Where is your content and metadata? And what authoring and approval process will you use? This transition period gives you time to try different approaches. There will be changes to how XML PM submissions are reviewed, validated, and authorized. Let's look at what's being planned. The current procedure requires you to submit the XML PM along with the Word formatted product monograph in the first sequence. The review is then done on the Word product monograph. Once approved, the final XML PM is submitted as a third and final step. This is slated to change though. In the future, the XML PM will be reviewed instead of the Word format. The Word product monograph might still be required as a convenience copy though, since it contains annotations for negotiations. Currently, for validation, an XML PM validation failure will not result in the failure of the entire ECTD submission sequence. This, however, will change. In the future, if there's any validation issues with the XML PM, it will fail the entire ECTD submission sequence, and this is another reason to move to the XML PM format sooner rather than later. For XML PM authorization, Health Canada currently approves the Word version, and the onus of finalizing the XML PM is on the market authorization holder. But the plan is that in the future, the XML PM will be the approved version because, as we mentioned, the Word version will become a convenience copy and will no longer be authorized. Okay, so let's say you've decided to transition from PM to XML PM. What do you need to do now? So you need to consider a few things when you're ready to transition from PM to XML PM. Right up front, you'll need to choose how you'd like to create the XML PM, whether via a vendor's XML PM tool, outsourcing, or an XML code editor. XML editors can be very difficult, especially if you don't have knowledge about coding in XML or the XML PM format. So let's talk about vendor tools or outsourcing. One of the approaches you will hopefully consider is IFRA's A4L software and or our outsourcing services. So using our software or services means that you have access to our regulatory experts who can answer any of your questions and help with any validation issues when you submit. Our application A4L is a plugin for Word that allows you to maintain one master document and generate multiple document formats from it, whether it's Word, PDF, and XML. And since it's a plugin for Microsoft Word, you're working in a very familiar interface. You author your XML PMs in the same way that you author your Word product monographs right now, and A4L takes care of the XML aspect behind the scenes. Then there's metadata, arguably the biggest new feature requirement of XML PM. Much of the power of metadata in XML PM is due to Health Canada's ability to standardize terms in control vocabulary lists. It may seem daunting at first as you'll have to collate information that's not necessarily sitting in the label. However, our XML PM templates are structured to align with Health Canada's requirements, including the control vocabulary headings and lists. We have all the required control vocabulary terms embedded in A4L along with their associated codes, making them very straightforward to deal with. You just pick a control vocabulary term and the associated code is set for you automatically. A further consideration is that you will need to convert not just one version of your product monograph, but two, one for each language. Here too, A4L allows you to author in both French and English. A4L aids the translation from one language to the other because all Health Canada section headings and much of the metadata are stored in controlled vocabulary lists. So automatic language conversion is done at the push of a button. This saves you money because headings and terms are already translated. It also saves you time as you know that you always conform with the official Health Canada terms. And what if you prefer outsourcing? Well, all of the above still applies as a team of regulatory professionals use A4L to convert your legacy product monograph and to update your XML PMs. So beyond choosing whether to use an XML PM tool or outsourcing service, I'd like to touch on a few concepts that can be tricky for XML PM beginners to contend with during the transition from working with unstructured Word or PDF documents to working with structured XML PMs. One of the big ones is the use of a style sheet for viewing the final XML PM in a web browser. Most often, people expect their labels to look exactly as they do in the Word document. However, the purpose of a style sheet is to apply a consistent style for all labels. This has the added benefits of easy searches within the product monograph, easy display on different screens, and greater readability for the end user, such as prescribers, patients, and the visually impaired. So minor formatting differences between the Word and the style sheet view are acceptable and are expected. Another tricky concept when transitioning to XML PM is metadata and where to find it. Much of it can be found on the title page and some can be taken from within the narrative content of your product monograph. while others may need to be sourced from outside of your product monograph. Then you'll need to know where to enter it and make sure it matches Health Canada's control vocabularies. The tool or service you choose to convert your legacy documents can have a huge impact here. Keep in mind that in the case of A4L, this is a one-time task. Once this information is entered into your XML PM, the bulk of it doesn't really change much from submission to submission. One of the growing pains with SPL in the US initially was the control vocabulary rollout, and we have the same growing pains now with XML PM. Generally, the issue is that there are items missing from the lists. In this case, you can either find and use a synonym that is on the list or reach out to Health Canada and request that they add the missing term to the official list. In A4L, we also give you the option to insert codes that are not yet available in control vocabularies, but that Health Canada is going to add. And what does the XML PM future hold? Within the XML PM format, there is still room for growth and expansion. Like its USSPL counterpart, we could see that XML PMs may one day require images of drug packaging to be included. And having these images in the label is a great help for the end users. We also imagine Health Canada adding other types of drug labels to the XML PM set. Currently, XML PM is only for human pharmaceutical, biologic, and radiopharmaceutical product labels, leaving the door open for OTC, veterinary medicines, and even cosmetics and natural health products. These would each require a new document type, and each document type would have new sections with defined headings, but the metadata fields for each would likely be similar, so the ramp-up time for each new one would be minimal for pharma. There could even be the requirement that product manufacturing information be included in the XML PMs. The facilities that process the drug at every level could be listed, which would further enhance user safety, and there is room for this information in the XML PM. In fact, certain SPL files in the US require it. And I know some of you have asked about the potential for the regulatory enrollment process, or REP data, to be used to populate XML PMs. There is definitely some data overlap, such as the company information, product ingredients, strengths, regulatory activity type, characteristics, and dosage forms. However, REP and XML PM use different XML standards, and while some of the data might be the same, the coding associated with it is different. Unless someone undertakes the task of creating this mapping, which could be a risky prospect, it is unlikely to happen in near future. Because XML PM is XML, it is poised for the exchange and harmonization of data on a global scale. You're probably thinking, firstly, of a possible SPL to XML PM data migration. On the surface, this seems like a trivial task, as both document types have the same SPL XML structure. And it is true that non-coded values such as brand name, generic name, and contact information text fields could be migrated with no issue. And some coded values such as unit of measure, color, flavor, and shape seem to align 100% with the FDA's SPL list. So migration of these would also be seamless. But there are a few different scenarios that currently will be an issue for SPL to XML PM migration. So first of all, some lists, such as the ingredient list, are a subset of the SPL ingredient list. So an SPL file could potentially have an ingredient that is not a valid XML PM ingredient. Second, a number of XML PM control vocabulary lists do not correspond with their SPL counterpart in any way. Examples of this are the dosage form, route of administration, and packaging lists. And if we wanted to consider migration of document content, we need to keep in mind that the section codes are completely different between SPL and XML PM. And also that some of the US SPL documents have content in specially coded markup called highlights. So that would also need to be considered. So the section mapping issue can be dealt with and is something we have already done at I4I between XML PM, SPL, and many other global labeling document types. But there would still need to be human intervention for the other issues. Finally, there are a number of control vocabulary lists used in XML PM for which there is no SPL equivalent, such as the product class, therapeutic classification, pharmaceutical standard, and scheduling symbol. Another consideration is that SPL files are only in English, so migration would always need to be done to an English XML PM, and then the French would need to be created from that. So a partial migration of some of the metadata is possible. For a complete migration, there would need to be mapping done for the lists that don't align between XML PM and SPL, which wouldn't be an easy task. And even if it was completed, the migration still wouldn't be perfect, especially for the content. Another format to consider for XML PM migration is FHIR, which stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. FHIR is another emerging Health Level 7 standard that allows the exchange of electronic healthcare data. In the US, the FDA is looking at using FHIR for PQ-CMC data, while in Europe, the EMA is using FHIR for patient records. And in fact, Health Canada was also looking at the interoperability of XML PM with FHIR a number of years ago, just to be sure XML PM was future-proof. So FHIR does allow multiple different code systems to be identified and be used for each term. For example, a route of administration could be coded with both the US SPL and XML PM codes and their respective code systems. Therefore, a FHIR document could actually contain codes for multiple jurisdictions such as the US, Canada, and Europe. And not only does FHIR allow multiple code systems to be held for each piece of metadata, but it also offers the potential to enhance the information held in each standard. For example, in FHIR, you can code indications, contraindications, interactions, adverse reactions, and warnings. Although your XML PMs have this information within the narrative content, just imagine the benefits of having this information as codable, machine-readable metadata. So while we don't have definitive answers of where XML PM will expand to in the future, having product monographs in the XML format is the gateway into the global EPI movement we are now starting to see. We look forward to continuing on this journey and sharing our knowledge with you.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're ready to move to our Q&A portion of our session. If you haven't already sent in your questions, then please feel free to do so now using the WebEx Q&A panel. And if you're watching this recording and you want to send us a question, please contact our I4I support team at support@i4i.com. I know we covered a lot of ground there, both technical and process-oriented, both some US SPL items as well as a lot on XML PM. So if you do have any questions, please let us know and enter in the Q&A panel. We'll just take a minute pause here to collate any questions and come back to you. Okay, thank you very much for all your questions. It was very interactive and some very good questions. We always like being put in the hot seat. If you do have any other questions after today's session, please feel free to reach out to us at support@i4i.com. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance today, and we'll keep you posted on our next webinar or discussion. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.